Have you ever wondered what would happen if Mark got his powers much earlier? For example, in his childhood. When Mark turned 8 years old, he suddenly began to gain Viltrumite powers from his father Omni-Man's genes. Omni-Man saw this as a great opportunity and began to take a much more active role in raising Mark, sometimes taking over the initiative from his mother Debbie. At such a young age, Mark doesn't understand what's good or bad, so he listens to his father in everything. Because, as we know, a father is far from the least admired figure in a child's eyes. Nolan gradually teaches Mark the ways of the Viltrumites, tells him about where he's from, and, as in the original universe, kills the Guardians of the Globe. But much earlier. Gradually, everything unfolds as expected, and Mark begins to see regular humans as cattle, just like cows or chickens, seeing them only as tools to achieve his goal, the conquest of the planet with his father. But the only one he doesn't remain indifferent to is his own mother. Although Nolan teaches Mark all things Viltrumite ideology, Debbie sometimes interfered with this, and so she was reprimanded and punished more than once. It was then that Nolan placed his goal of conquering Earth above his human family. Debbie tried in every way to resist and teach Mark truly good things, but each time Nolan won, assuring him that people are just animals, expendable resources. They would say, "You're not a machine, Mark. You're a human. This is your strength, not your weakness. You are my blood. You shouldn't feel. You must win. You are Viltrumite." And so, when Mark turned 10, it was time to execute Nolan's plan, which he had been preparing for so long. Together with Mark, they finally began to conquer Earth, destroying cities. But Mark, during some ruthless moments of killing people, saw his mother's face and heard her voice, forbidding him to do so. During the attack on Chicago, Mark again froze, in a trance, recalling his mother's words. But Nolan noticed this and quickly pulled him away, reminding him of their mission. And so, during another destruction, when nothing could resist Mark and Nolan, Mark noticed that somewhere among the rubble lay his mother. Debbie was lying there. In a panic and protective rush, he ran to her, trying to free her. But Nolan pulled him away again and they began to fight. During the conflict, Nolan, to prove his point, broke Debbie's arm with a single press on her wrist. Mark, of course, was shocked and in pain, and in a surge of anger and rage rushed at Nolan, striking him. A fierce battle began between them, where, in the end, Nolan easily defeated his son. At the same time, GDA and Cecil arrived at Debbie's still living body, saving her, since she was not only a tool for controlling Mark's mind, but also a GDA agent. Yes, all this time, Debbie had been a GDA agent, specially chosen to influence Nolan before he destroyed the world. But it seems that Debbie had failed her mission. As for Mark and Nolan, unlike the original universe, Nolan leaves Earth not because of his feelings for his family and son, but because Mark is unstable. He realizes that Mark is an unfinished and weak product. His son, whom he had raised as the Viltrumite heir, turned out to be too damaged by human emotions. He's not just weak, he's dangerous. Not only to enemies, but to the Viltrum Empire itself. Nolan sees that leaving Mark on Earth could result in him rebelling at any moment, as already happened today due to some human attachment. But killing his son is also impossible, not because he loves him, but because he spent years on him. And there are no others like him on Viltrum. He is active, underdeveloped, but still potentially valuable. After all, Mark is Nolan's son, a conqueror of thousands of planets and one of the strongest and most valuable Viltrumites. Nolan decides to reprogram Mark, planning to return after some time, knowing he can conquer the world with the Viltrum Empire anytime since Earth is weakened. Nolan leaves to report to the Empire and prepare a real invasion, no longer through manipulation, but with an army. And Mark, he will leave behind, observe, let him ripen, or go crazy. Either way, he'll He'll be useful. After all the destruction, thousands of victims, Mark is taken to a GDA hospital where he quickly recovers, but not his mother. When Mark finally healed, he spent almost all his time in the hospital corridor, watching as the doctors tried to save Debbie, while Cecil sat next to him, saying everything would be okay, that she would be fine, but he was giving false hope. Since Debbie wouldn't survive, and Cecil knew this very well, he decided to use Mark for his own purposes, preparing for Nolan's invasion and the Empire's arrival. Cecil imposed on him that Mark must, just oblige to redeem his guilt for his father and himself, since it was they who destroyed the city. He reinforced this with the fact that Debbie would have wanted this, that she would have wanted Mark to help people. Mark had no choice but to agree, as otherwise he had nowhere to go, with neither a mother nor a father. After some time, Mark became an anonymous hero in a mask, or wore a bandana like Hooded Mark from the alternate universe. This was also supported by the fact that Cecil, in moments of disobedience, threatened Mark to disconnect Debbie from life support. Mark gradually became more and more bitter towards people, his father, and the Viltrum Empire. On one hand, for him, most people are like Cecil, selfish, cruel, hypocritical, but some are still worthy of life. His father, on the other hand, he both hates and idolizes because he's his father, just as he idolized the Viltrum Empire. And so, gradually, Mark trained to conquer the planet himself, and partially prepare it for the arrival of the Viltrum Empire, so he could negotiate with them and become the local Emperor of Earth. After all, if he becomes Emperor of Earth, he will personally be able to control which people to leave alive, and which not. Kill those like Cecil and his kind. Kill the hypocritical pieces of garbage, and spare those like his mother. Mark became progressively isolated in the Dark Realm, practicing and retaliating and slowly metamorphosing into the character Nolan has always envisioned him to be, relentless and resolute. However, as he went deeper and deeper into this process, it became clearer and clearer to him that that's not what he wants really. He just doesn't need the Earth. He needs something more. He needs a different kind of Earth, where there won't be that much oppression of feelings, and where people like Cecil won't be abusive. Following through with all the killings, every single crime, every step towards the big finale, was not only tearing him apart from the inside, but was also causing his moral doubts to become more and more profound. Perhaps he might be not like this at all. Maybe he's not a Viltrumite, and rejecting his father's and Empire's ideology might be his rightful act. This thought recurred over time, specifically when he had time to stay alone with his thoughts, when random thoughts about her mother's fate popped up, or when he was haunted by her words that still stayed with him in his memory despite the years. He was not only the heir of Viltrum, not only the tool that the Empire controls. He was a child who was sincerely puzzled by the fact that he didn't know where his place was. Perhaps he felt the pain of being unable to express himself. At the crossroads of his decision to move to the next attack on some city yet to be conquered, or the choice to opt otherwise so that he could be reconciled among other thoughts, a different event brought his musings to an abrupt stop. Viltrum Empire, once again, had dispatched its troops to destroy the Earth. Nolan had come back. It dawned on Mark now that his father had never given up on him. He wasn't in for a peaceful conversation. He had returned to take Mark home, to repossess Earth, to put his son in a lower rank, and to begin conquest anew. Mark found himself standing at a crossroads. To him, it was perfectly clear that if he followed Nolan, he would be condemned. Without doubt, he would be coerced to be what he never really was again. On the other hand, if he stood against his father, he would be unable to have peace with the Empire ever again. However, Mark was not the same scared boy easily influenced by his father. He was more powerful, he was prepared, and he had the right support to do so. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your opinion in the comments. I'll be happy to read each one and respond. Good luck, everyone.
Full Mask Mark. Full Mask Mark, a supervillain from an alternate reality, joined the multiverse attack with a disturbing detachment from the carnage that ensued. However, he differed significantly from his counterparts. Demonstrating a willingness to destroy, he retained a deep affection for his late mother, a tenderness for his past, and a generally gentler disposition. He also recoiled from the ruthless behavior of the other variants and their relentless ambitions for conquest. This internal conflict was further emphasized by his selfish desire to kidnap the underlying Debbie, revealing a complex character driven by both enduring familial love and selfish impulses, a mixture of villainy and surprising, albeit flawed, humanity. Mohawk Mark. Mohawk Invincible is a maniac and sadist who enjoys causing death and destruction. He is also immature and caustic, often mocking his opponents and not even respecting anyone else. Much of Mohawk Invincible's history remains unknown, except for the fact that in his reality, he became a supervillain and killed his own mother. Mohawk was one of the evil variants of Invincible hired by Engstrom Levi to wreak havoc and destruction in the core dimension, which started the devastating, world-shattering event known as the Invincible War. In the comics, he killed Adam Eve but regretted it. He also became the ruler of his Earth and made Trag a fugitive. He is recognized by fans as a fairly average Mark. However, as the Menestream original Mark was able to knock him out with one punch. Sinister Mark. Sinister represents a horrifying escalation of evil that surpasses even the most twisted of his predecessors. He is a psychopathic killer completely devoid of humanity, whose brutality and sadism mirror the most heinous of serial criminals. Driven by a relentless, single-minded focus on his goals, especially murder, he wastes no time or energy on anything but their swift and brutal completion. His volatile aggression manifests itself in constant outbursts of anger and verbal abuse, making him a constantly dangerous and unpredictable force. Fans have even noted that Sinister Invincible bears some similarities to Homelander from The Boys, as both are villainous super beings who wear capes and have psychopathic personalities, showing pleasure in playing and killing their enemies. In the comics, the inhabitants of Sinister's reality are said to be more unstable than the inhabitants of other universes. Prisoner Mark. This version of Invincible is characterized by an extremely aggressive and ruthless personality. He willingly agrees to torture Engstrom in a sadistic manner. Like his dimensional counterparts, this Invincible became evil and joined his father in conquering Earth. Unlike most versions, however, this version's skin was burned and most, if not all, of his hair was gone. At some point, for unknown reasons, this Invincible was imprisoned in a Wiltramite prison, possibly on the asteroid Wiltram, for a year. The imprisoned Invincible was one of the Invincible variants assembled by Engstrom Levi to start a war known as the Invincible War to take over the core dimension. His appearance may be a reference to when Anakin Skywalker was left to burn after his battle with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Fans sometimes refer to him as Mark Skywalker. Mustache Invincible. His identity is unknown, as he does not utter a word during his appearance. However, it can be assumed that he is pragmatic and ruthless, as he clearly supported his father and has fully adopted his Wiltramite heritage, including his trademark mustache and attire. The mustachioed Invincible was one of the alternate versions of the Invincibles who joined the Invincible War to take over the bulk of Earth. High above Earth, he encountered Tech Jacket and fought him in space. Tech Jacket proved to be a more than worthy opponent for the hapless variant, and Mustache Mark was defeated and killed on the spot after a fierce battle. He truly believes he is doing the right thing, seeing domination as the same as peace and prosperity. Emperor Invincible. Emperor Invincible is a very arrogant and smug warrior. He appears much more aggressive and gruff, often shouting in an angry tone. Considering himself so superior to others, He bullies them to the point that they are not worthy of being his slave. Not much is known about the backstory of this variant, except that he managed to create his own empire. Perhaps this empire is the Wiltrumite Empire, and he became emperor. After Mark realized his true power and purpose as a Wiltrumite, he decided to abandon the humanism and softness that prevented him from becoming the strongest. At some point, he realized that to achieve true greatness, he had to completely abandon the human part of himself. Omni-Man in this universe either died in battle with Mark or submitted to his will, recognizing his son's superiority. This version is a much weaker version than the mainstream Mark. Hoodvincible. Hoodvincible is an arrogant man who mocks others for being weaker than him and is portrayed as a berserk warrior. He is also rude and swears a lot, unlike the other Marks. In the comics, this Invincible fought the Cyber Scylla team, a team that had similar abilities and attributes to the X-Men, and also broke Adam Eve's leg. He was also killed by Invincible, but in the series, Vale Invincible fought a bunch of heroes before defeating them. He was defeated by both Invincible and Adam Eve before Omni-Invincible arrived to help him. Since he was last seen being attacked by Reaniman while Omni-Invincible survived his battle, it can be assumed that he was killed by Reaniman. Bald Mark. Bald Mark is a sadist who relishes the opportunity to inflict as much pain as possible on his enemy. Nothing is known about the backstory of this Invincible. In the comics, he has fought Savage Dragon, Mighty Man 2, Angelica Murphy, and Super Patriot. He was killed by Savage Dragon. But in the series, he fought Oliver Grayson, overpowering the young hero until Throwbolt and another heroine joined in. Presumably, he was killed by the trio off-screen, as he was not among the surviving variants on the third day of Invincible War. Also, presumably, Oliver Grayson does not exist in his universe, as the latter did not recognize him when Oliver appeared. It can be understood that his universe is radically different from the others. Lensless Mark. This variant is shown to be particularly sadistic and cruel, even among his fellow humans. He is infantile and self-righteous, bullying his opponents and constantly talking during battle. He enjoys battle and carnage and was very surprised by Shap Smith's strange dying words. His ruthless nature is emphasized when he laments that he seems to have killed his opponents too quickly and did not have time to enjoy their cries of pain. He's very arrogant, which makes him vulnerable. Not much is known about this Invincible except that, like his other counterparts, he has become evil. In his home universe, he managed to kill the Guardians of the Globe, mentioning that Nolan from his reality was there to assist him in this endeavor. Bulletproof Invincible. Most of Bulletproof Invincible's history is unknown, except that in his reality, he became a supervillain and wore a suit similar to the one Bulletproof wears in the normal dimension. Bulletproof Invincible appeared in the comics and was one of the few evil Invincibles destroyed by Reaniman. Originally, at the time of the comics' creation, it was assumed that Invincible's name would be Bulletproof. Original brand Invincible before he became Invincible. The series version of Bulletproof Invincible is likely an homage to the original Mark's design. It is literally unknown what character this version of Mark has, but it is most likely a blend of Mark and the original Bulletproof. Tracksuit Mark. Much of Tracksuit Mark identity remains unknown, except for the fact that he became a supervillain in his dimension. He seemed to have no qualms about the death and destruction he caused during the Invincible War. Not much is known about this Invincible except that, like his other counterparts, he became a supervillain in his reality. In a flashback from this dimension of Invincible, Angstrom experiences an event where CW took pleasure in destroying a city and civilians. When he did, the destruction killed many people, including Angstrom's spouse. This particular version of Invincible is often referred to by fans as CW's Invincible, in honor of the costume design featured in the Arrowverse franchise on the CW, and his manner of speaking. Omnimark. This variant is ruthless, as he has become a supervillain in his dimension. Unlike most of his evil counterparts, Omni-Invincible is a practical person. He also possesses a certain coldness, not expressing much emotion. He speaks in a calm, even tone and never raises his voice. He dislikes the childish behavior of some of his variants, such as Veil Invincible, expressing that Veil Invincible's use of profanity does not equate to superior behavior. He is also shown to be a very aloof person, as he openly admits to hating Adam, Eve, and his house. In the comics, he killed his father in his dimension. It is currently unknown if this is true for the series version. Retromark. Retro Invincible was a ruthless and sadistic variant of the basic Invincible, reveling in the destruction and death it caused. He is more calm and collected than the other variants. Unlike some of his more aggressive brethren, he speaks in a cold, deadly monotone voice. Nothing is known about Retro Invincible's backstory other than that he managed to kill Rex Splodus in his dimension and knew that Robot was just a series of drones controlled by a deformed human. Perhaps this variant of Mark in his universe killed Robot, which fundamentally reversed the event in his universe as opposed to the mainstream universe. Flaxen Invincible. This dimensional variant took on the role of supervillain, willingly participating in the Invincible War and displaying a disturbing indifference to the massive destruction and loss of life it caused. His character is unknown verbatim, as he has remained silent throughout the series. He wears typical flaxen armor, black glasses, and a short haircut. In the comics, Flaxen the Invincible attacks the Pentagon, but is killed by the combined might of Britt, Donald, and Cecil. But in the series, he faces only Cecil and Donald, having been beaten to death by Reaniman. Curiously, this variant had his head smashed by Reaniman during the Invincible War. However, when his corpse was remade into Reaniman, his head was shown completely intact. Long hair mark. This variant has the same build as most of the evil Invincibles, but similar to the fourth Invincible, he doesn't have a mask, but has glasses and has long hair. Based on his appearance, this Invincible could be his own version of the long-haired alternate Invincible from the comics who ends up fighting Techno Jacket. In the comics, he fought Tech Jacket, being defeated by him before another version of Invincible joined and defeated him. He even states that the reason he fought his battle is because he doesn't have Tech Jacket in his universe, to which the other variant, however, admits that Tech Jacket doesn't exist in his timeline, mentioning that he has killed many Geldarians. Tech Jacket then uses his suit's self-destruct, which kills both options, though Zack barely survives. But in the series, he never faces Tech Jacket, and is instead killed by the combined efforts of Kid Omni-Man, Throwbolt, and Bug-Eye. Wiltram Mark. Wiltram the Invincible is ruthless, as he will join his father to join the Wiltram Empire and rule Earth in his dimension. He and other Invincibles in different dimensions will be gathered by Angstrom Levi to begin what is known as the War of the Invincibles, taking over the main dimension. He visibly reacts as the Dark Invincible mourns his late mother and remembers his past, which may indicate that Wiltram the Invincible still has a subtle sense of humanity and may have doubts about the Wiltram Empire. Little is known about this Invincible and his sinister deeds on Earth. However, like most other versions of Invincible, he accepts his father's offer to join the Wiltramite Empire. Gay Invincible. This dimensional variant has taken on the role of supervillain, willingly taking part in the Invincible War, and displaying a disturbing indifference to the massive destruction and loss of life he caused. Despite this, he comes across as much more judicious and passive than his counterparts. His demeanor is reserved and almost melancholy. A glimmer of humanity remains as he expresses a sincere longing for William. This suggests that beneath his villainous persona lies a more complex nature, and perhaps he regrets what he did in his home universe. In the comics, he fought Adam Eve, even stating that he was happy to kill her again. It is implied that this variant was in love, had a relationship with William from his world. Unknown Mark. It's literally the unknown Mark who was defeated by Powerplex. Nothing is known about him starting with his appearance and character. Are you sure? Are you sure? Meme that just destroyed my brain. Anyway, it's a scene from the first episode of Invincible where Omni-Man looks at Mark and asks with a serious face, "Are you sure?"
Are you sure?
A seemingly ordinary moment, but the internet has done its thing. The main draw of this meme is the jackass quality and the sound like it was recorded on a toaster. This makes the phrase 1,000 times funnier. This meme started gaining popularity on TikTok in late 2024 and early 2025. It started to be used in brain rot videos when you just repeat a phrase until your brain refuses to work. And now, "Are you sure?" can be inserted into any context. If a friend says something stupid, if you are facing an important choice, if you have no arguments, just say, "Are you sure?" And that's it. Title card. Title card is one of the best memes from Invincible. It started with the fact that in the show itself, characters rarely say the word. Instead, when someone is about to say the title, the screen would abruptly turn blood red and a title card would appear with Invincible written on it. The internet naturally couldn't ignore this. TikTok started making memes, replacing title card in the most unexpected places. Sometimes in scenes from other movies and TV shows, sometimes even in real life. Someone asks, "So who's the real killer?" Bam, title card. This meme has become universal. If you want to dramatically cut off a conversation or let someone know that something important is about to happen, you just insert title card. Now you won't be able to see it either. WhatsApp Vincible. WhatsApp Vincible is the meme no one asked for, but everyone deserves. Anyway, imagine Mark Grayson, the main character of Invincible, but in WhatsApp colors. His suit is completely repainted green with the WhatsApp logo on his chest. That's it. That's the fun part. This meme is pure visual shitpost. Someone on the internet thought, what if Mark was a WhatsApp ambassador, made this skin, and it went viral? Now, WhatsApp Vincible is walking around the internet and there's no hiding from it. And there are probably other versions out there somewhere. Imagine Mark in the colors of Twitch, YouTube, or heaven forbid, Telegram. The world is not yet ready for Telegram Vincible, but someone will definitely draw it. And the scary thing is that such a Mark could actually exist. Imagine an alternate universe where Mark is not a superhero, but a WhatsApp mascot. And you go to the app and there he is. Immortal brain rot. Where's Omni-Man? The new brain rot meme that burns your brain. Anyway, it's the scene in Invincible where Immortal, wildly angry, yells, "Where's Omni-Man?" like he wants to find him and kick his ass. But the internet, as always, has done its thing. The key point is the shaky quality. The sound is like it was recorded through a Nokia 3310. The pixels are the size of bricks. Everything is perfect for brain rot content. In TikTok, this phrase started to appear in videos where a person is seriously looking for something. Looking for a friend in a crowd? Where's Omni-Man? This is the second Invincible meme to have this effect. First it was, "Are you sure?" Now it's, Where's Omni-Man? Soon, probably every phrase from the show will be brain rot sounding. So be prepared. Now this scream will be heard in your head at the most inopportune moments. Dance If You Carry. Dance If You Carry Episode 7, Season 3 is a meme for true MVPs. Anyway, the 7th episode of Invincible's 3rd season was so powerful that it was literally taken out by 3 versions of Mark: Mohawk Mark, Sinister Mark, and Regular Mark. So how do they celebrate that? With a dance, of course. And so the meme was born, the 3 Marks standing in a row and moving to the music because they dragged this episode. In TikTok, this scene started to be used in any context where someone drags a situation. For example, if you alone did all the group work, dance if you carry. If a player on the team did the entire score, dance if you carry. This meme is the perfect way to say, yes, we did it, and we know we were the best. So now, if you've dragged something down in life, know this. It's time for you to dance. Powerplex. Powerplex is the most tragic yet meme-ish character of Season 3. Anyway, in Episode 6 of Invincible Season 3, Powerplex appears, a dude who really hates Mark. All because of the tragedy in Chicago, he's convinced that Mark is to blame for the deaths of his sister and niece, but was never punished. So he decides to get revenge, but accidentally kills his family himself. He blames Mark again, and that's where the meme goes into high gear. Most importantly, Powerplex is voiced by Aaron Paul, the same Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad. And when the cops take him away, the internet has framed Jesse's iconic shout of, "He can't keep getting away with it."
Every dead body you find is a person he killed. He can't keep getting away with it. He can't keep getting away with it. He won't.
Perfectly describing his emotions. And so the meme was born. The Powerplex is now the official face of injustice. Any situation where someone gets away with it is now accompanied by that sound. Sea salt. Sea salt when calling for help, but you get the meme. Anyway, during a tough battle with Conquest, Mark sees his girlfriend, Atomic Eve, being mortally wounded. In a panic, he screams, but the internet, as usual, can't take the drama seriously. Fans heard that scream not as Cecil, but as sea salt. And it went viral. Now, if something goes wrong, you can just yell sea salt, and everyone will realize you're totally desperate. But what's even funnier is that just a couple episodes ago, Mark swore that he wouldn't work with Cecil anymore. And as soon as something bad happens, he just calls him out like nothing happened. The fans troll him even more for it. So now sea salt is not just a meme, it's the new universal distress signal. Cookie. Who got that cookie? Is the most damning meme from Invincible. Anyway, this is a scene from episode 4 of season 1. Mark returns from a mission on Mars, approaches the house, and hears strange noises. Inside, Omni-Man and his wife Debbie are clearly engaged in something 18+. But the internet has decided that just moaning is too boring. Someone put a voiceover of Omni-Man yelling loudly, "Who got that cookie?" And that's how the meme was born. That phrase isn't in the original, but now everyone believes it was. This meme is pure cringe comedy. It is used when a situation becomes too uncomfortable or too personal. For example, walking into a friend's room without knocking, "Who got that cookie?" So be careful. If you hear this phrase, you better turn around right away.
You've seen the Invincible series. You've seen one possible version of the future. But just how powerful is Mark? if he truly becomes emperor. By the end of season 3, Mark demonstrated incredible strength, but that's still far from his peak. Spoilers ahead. If you don't want any, I suggest turning off this video. Before his fight with Conquest, Mark was always trying to hold back his strength to avoid seriously harming his opponents. Mark himself admits this in Season 2, Episode 1, but gradually his personality starts to change, especially with the arrival of Oliver. It's Oliver who shows Mark that sometimes you shouldn't hold back. Some villains won't, and they will try to kill him. Mark had started to realize this earlier. For example, when he threatened Cecil, saying he would kill him if he ever came near his family. But he didn't fully embrace that philosophy until much later. If we look back at his battle with Conquest, we might think Mark is now the second strongest being in the Invincible universe, but...
Actually, Adam Eve helped him.
Yeah, thanks. Anyway, even though Mark beat Conquest, it wasn't solely with his own strength. Adam Eve helped. Still, it was an impressive achievement that made him at least an elite soldier of the Viltrumite Empire. Later, Mark faced Conquest again, and finally defeated him with minimal help from Nolan and Oliver. Speaking of Nolan and Oliver, if we take a look at Mark's lineage, it's clear that he's practically a pure-blood Viltrumite, making him one of the strongest in the Invincible universe. Mark is 50% human and 50% Viltrumite. We were told earlier that humans are nearly 99% genetically compatible with Viltrumites, making Mark Grayson rather unique, effectively a pure-blood Viltrumite. Mark's father, Nolan Grayson, is also a powerful Viltrumite, and his grandfather, Emperor Argal. Mark basically won the genetic lottery to become the strongest being alive. Not long after defeating Conquest, Mark and Nolan had an arm wrestling match, and their strength was equal. Keep in mind, Mark was only about 23 to 26 years old at that point, with limited combat experience, while Nolan was an elite Viltrumite veteran with years of planetary conquest, strategy, and insane strength.
So Mark is already almost as strong as Nolan?
Yes, and that's what's so fascinating. We're watching Mark grow not just as a hero, but as potentially the strongest Viltrumite of all time. His strength doesn't just increase, he adapts. After returning from another planet where he spent years, his combat skills improved dramatically. He didn't just learn to fight, he learned to win. Quickly, efficiently, without emotion. He's colder now, more resolute. His fighting style no longer screams, "I don't want to kill you." Now it's, "If you're a threat, I'll eliminate you." And this is the beginning of the era of Emperor Mark. Emperor Mark isn't a villain, but he's not the naive teenager we once knew. He's become someone else, a leader, someone who bears responsibility, someone who makes the hard choices. And if peace requires erasing someone from existence, he'll do it. That's what makes him so dangerous. Because he has power, and he has the will to use it. But Mark's strength isn't just about punches, flight, or arm wrestling his dad. His real strength lies in who he's become as a person.
You mean moral growth?
Exactly. Think back to Season 1. He wanted to be a hero like in the comics. He believed everyone could be saved, but the world was much harsher. He was beaten, betrayed, manipulated. He saw death. He lost loved ones. And through all that, Mark didn't become cruel. He didn't turn into a dictator. He became responsible. He realized that strength isn't just about beating someone. It's a duty. He learned to forgive, but not betrayal. He became patient, but won't let anyone threaten his loved ones. He doesn't seek violence, but in battle he's ruthless. That's true maturity. And in a world where power is everything, that's what makes Mark the ideal leader. Jordan, okay, back to the main question. Just how strong is Emperor Mark? Plainly put, Mark can destroy a planet. Literally. We've seen Viltrumites break through Earth's crust, fly through mountains, and demolish buildings like cardboard. And Mark is stronger than most of them. He's broken Viltrumite bones. He's killed them. He survived blows that tore others apart. His body adapts, gets tougher. He heals faster. But power isn't just brute force. He can fly faster than light, fight in space, endure the gravity of black holes. And on top of that, he's a strategist. He's not just brute muscle. He thinks 3 steps ahead. He finds weaknesses, uses his environment, builds a plan. In theory, at his peak, he could take on entire armies. For example, he could single-handedly destroy the coalition of planets' fleet. Not easily, not instantly, but he could. All because of a unique combination of genetics, experience, and motivation. But if we bring up the coalition of planets, we can't forget Alan the alien, who can resurrect with medical help and each time come back stronger. That potential is infinite, which, in theory, makes him capable of defeating Mark. We saw a fight between Alan and Mark once, but Trag suddenly appeared and helped Mark. Speaking of Trag, in their final battle, Mark and Trag fought on the sun. Like literally, where the temperature reaches 9,930 degrees Fahrenheit, and the most they suffered were some burns. During that fight, Mark likely got a huge dose of adrenaline, something Trag, as a full Viltrumite, doesn't have. And there's a fan theory that this adrenaline boosts Mark's attributes, pushing him to the edge. This ability comes solely from his human DNA, and it saved him more than once. This human factor is distinctive to him. Unlike the Viltrumites, Mark is able to drive himself to his limits emotionally. He has the so-called adrenaline surge, fueling briefly his body's powers. When his feelings reach their boiling point, either fury or defending somebody, he grows stronger. That's how he managed to stay even with Trag, even with the difference in physiques.
Such as the times where Mark, having fallen into an angry fury, destroys his enemies. You're telling me it's not about training or genes?
Precisely so. A combination of adaptive biology and survival instinct of humans. Mark is not some genetically engineered individual. He became who he is due to his passion to protect those that he loves, and this strengthens him at times of crisis. He's powerful not only physically, but emotionally and morally because he is human. That puts him at an advantage over anyone, even including Trag and other Viltrumites.
So, his humanness is the wild card that renders him truly invincible?
Exactly. We've witnessed the power of the Viltrumites, but there is that missing human emotion that sets Mark apart. When it comes to survival, the Viltrumites use only brute power. And Mark, he is a combination of strength, will, and potential to grow. Not only physical strength, but inner strength. Even if he has to combat Alan, who comes back to life and grows more powerful after dying, Mark wouldn't be at a disadvantage necessarily. He may never be immortal, but his resilience to adapt and to exceed himself always leaves him with an opportunity to triumph. And yes, you're absolutely right. His humanity is what truly makes him invincible. It's not just the adrenaline, it's his deep emotional bonds. He has something to fight for. People to love, unlike most Viltrumites across the multiverse. His empathy, capacity for love, compassion, friendship, and support, all of it makes Mark truly invincible. People make memes about Mark. They laugh at him, call him Vincible, say he can almost die from simple villains. But physical power is just a facade. The same facade of masculinity I broke down in a previous video. You should check it out. Anyway, just because Mark looks vincible on the outside doesn't mean he is inside. Inside, he's much stronger. Not just because of willpower, but because of support and love.
Yeah, that support and affection render him spiritually invincible, not to mention his physical invincibility.
Yes, his relationship to the individuals he cares about and guards is what grants him such strength. Though his body is wounded, his spirit remains unbroken. It is like an inner shield guarding him not only against physical suffering, but emotional disintegration. His greatest strength lies in his humanity. He is not flawless. He is not invulnerable conventionally, but he doesn't give up.
Thus, according to the theory of his invisible strength based on emotional and moral resilience, he's nearly invincible, isn't he?
Yes, precisely. Although Mark is not classically immortal, his mental toughness and resilience to withstand any test render him really invincible. In clashes with Conquest, Trag, or others who challenge him to his limits, it is his capacity to rebound, his mental toughness and determination to continue, which puts him at an advantageous position. Jordan, he doesn't break, and that is what enables him to endure and triumph, no matter what the odds are.
In one sense, not even sheer power can defeat him?
Precisely. We've witnessed him suffer, be battered, but he never loses the strength to stand up again. Even if his body is destroyed, his soul is still intact. He does not lose himself if he loses the battle. That is what the series keeps repeating time after time. He hurts, yet he continues pushing forward. And that is what makes him so powerful. Because strength in the world of Invincible does not only exist in the physical, it exists in the soul. He is not one who desires power itself, however. His physical vigor, as well as his character, qualifies him to be the one to lead. And he'll be prepared to lead his race into battle if he has to. Most importantly, he'll recall that it is not all about winning. It is all about what remains after him. That's what makes him a leader worth following. And after becoming emperor, Mark completely rejected the Viltrumite past. He changed his suit from red and white to blue and white. He didn't grow the iconic mustache, a clear sign that the bloody past of the Viltrumites is behind him.
Oh, so you mean his change in appearance is symbolic, like a statement that he's no longer like the Viltrumites?
Precisely. This change from red-white to blue-white, the absence of the mustache, it's not just a stylistic decision. It's his way of saying he rejects the legacy of violence and conquest associated with the Viltrumites. Those colors and symbols are reminders of a brutal imperial past, and Mark is stepping away from that to create something new. It's a visual signal that he's no longer following the path the Viltrumites carved out. He's not their tyrant. He's forging a new identity, not just in how he looks, but in how he leads. Blue and white stand for peace and hope, directly contrasting the red of war and destruction. It's another example of how his humanity and personal growth make him even stronger. He understands that true strength isn't just physical, it's the courage to evolve and lead with purpose. His appearance reflects an internal transformation. He's not just a new emperor, he's a different kind of leader. One ready to build a future where the Viltrumite past stays buried.
Okay, whatever. Let's get back to the main theme. How does Mark compare to Battle Beast, Trag, and Alan? How strong is he next to them?
It's a bit complicated. Each of them brings a different kind of threat with their own unique strengths. Starting with Battle Beast, he's a brutal warrior, incredibly strong and durable. But his real advantage lies in his sheer endurance and skill in combat. Still, he was ultimately killed by Trag in their final battle, which shows that even with all his power, he couldn't overcome Trag's superior strength. Now, Trag is a more complex opponent. He's incredibly strong as a Viltrumite, no question, but he lacks the human traits that Mark has. In their fight on the sun, Trag had the physical edge, but Mark relied on both his emotional resilience and his physical uniqueness to win. Trag can't adapt or respond on an instinctual level the way Mark can, thanks to his human DNA. So even though Trag had more raw power, Mark still beat him. As for Alan, in terms of brute force and endurance, he might top the list. Thanks to his regeneration and the fact that he grows stronger every time he dies, He's an overwhelming force, but that doesn't make him unbeatable. Mark's adaptability, emotional intensity, and tactical thinking give him the edge with the right strategy. A fight between the two could last indefinitely, since Alan keeps coming back stronger. But in the long run, Mark's versatility and deep understanding of his own powers would likely win out.
So we can say that Mark may not always be physically stronger than those characters, but his adaptability, moral resilience, and human emotion, that's his trump card. If they fought on equal terms, Mark would probably win against all of them.
Exactly. Mark's strength isn't just in his body or his combat skills, it's in his ability to adapt, to make difficult choices, and to tap into his humanity. Even if Battle Beast, Trag, or Alan surpass him in brute force, they don't have his emotional depth or flexibility, and that's what sets him apart. That's his greatest advantage. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe and put a like if you liked it. Write a comment and I will reply. In the animated series Invincible, the subject of masculinity isn't dealt with overtly, yet it's a key underlying theme, even if not explicitly discussed. Yeah, masculinity is a general word, but quite frankly, who cares? Most people have pretty much the same idea in their head when they think of masculinity. Among the most emblematic figures symbolizing traditional notions of masculinity are Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Lee. It's undeniable that these men are absolute legends. Films, culture, and society have made them the ultimate tough guys, and have positioned them as role models for what it means to be a man. These three possess some essential characteristics linked with courage: discipline, boldness, ambition, a well-developed physique, unbreakable will, and unflinching dedication to their beliefs. A prime example of these characteristics in Invincible is Nolan Grayson, otherwise referred to as Omni-Man. Analyzing the name itself reveals the kind of individual he is. Omni signifies all-powerful, or always present, and man requires no explanation. Combined, Omni-Man connotes the absolute, unblemished ideal of male perfection, a faultless warrior with unwavering will, drive, and unyielding devotion to his causes. But here's the twist. If you watch the events that unfold in the first season of Invincible, you'll notice the writers deconstruct his Omni-Man character. And no, I don't mean his vicious deeds or the devastation that he leaves on Earth. His betrayal of the Viltrum Empire marks the actual turning point. It's apparent that throughout his brutal battle with his son, Mark, Nolan regrets and hesitates. His previously unbreakable will and allegiance to the Empire begin to waver. This is affirmed when, rather than killing Mark, he breaks his mission and leaves the planet. A betrayal against the same values on which he had based his whole existence. Nolan finds himself in crisis. He cannot go back to Earth as he's considered a criminal, yet he's broken on the inside too because everything he had committed his life to turned out to be a deception. In his greatest moment, his greatest test, his will failed. He could not sacrifice his family for the sake of the Empire. He acted against his own morals, falling prey to a love that discredits his race. Though deep inside, Nolan did care for his wife and his son, he could not fully display his fatherly affection for Mark. We can witness this in the special issue with Adam Eve, as Nolan responds negatively to the childish behavior of his son, such as when he teases himself as Duct Tape Man. At this point, he even thinks about killing his son and wife, but stops. He covers his face with his hand, recognizing the beast that he had turned into. In a typical patriarchal household, the head of the house is the father. He's the one who takes care of the family, yet, owing to his duties, he never gets enough time for his children as his job eats away all his time. But this isn't the case with Nolan. He isn't an average father, not only because of his superpowers, but because his duties are far greater. He's a superhero. It's him who saves lives, who provides people with hope. Placing yourself in his position, the responsibility becomes too much. This is a dilemma faced by Spider-Man as well. Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, will always struggle between his personal life and his work as a hero. But in the majority of the comic books and films, Peter will end up being a hero and sacrifice his personal well-being in the process. Another individual who represents this conflict is the revolutionary Che Guevara, who left his children and wife behind to go on his revolutionary mission in Bolivia, where his life came to a tragic end. But the fact that Nolan left Earth did not finish his mission and betrayed the Viltrum Empire goes against the conventional notions of courage, dedication, and allegiance to one's ideals. Nolan never took the typical route of blind devotion to a system. He chose himself. He chose his own way. And in a lot of respects, the decision necessitated more courage than the conventional route. For what's the use in battling for the ideal if you can't enjoy it? What's the use in maintaining a belief if all it does is bring you and your friends and family only sorrow? When Nolan escaped Earth, he had become a broken individual, a devastated and disoriented soul, even considering suicidal thoughts by being consumed by a black hole. But later on, we find that he assists the Thraxans and develops a purpose in life through self-introspection and love. Although Nolan is an interesting character who breaks down conventional notions of masculinity, a more intriguing character still exists. My favorite character in the entire animated series is probably Cecil. Unlike the classic yet kind-hearted giant Omni-Man and the more childish Mark, whom we'll discuss later, Cecil is pragmatic, tough, and rational. He is willing to make moral compromises and will stop at nothing to protect what matters most. His famous quote, "We can be the good guys or we can be the guys that save the world. We can't be both." At first glance, Cecil might seem like just another classic courageous character, with the only difference being his ideals and goals. But, as they say, the devil is in the details. While the typical hero adheres to strict moral principles even when they threaten his mission, Cecil is different. He's willing to sacrifice the idea of heroism for the sake of achieving results. His quote reveals his worldview. He doesn't believe one can be both good in the traditional sense and still save the world. This makes him more than just a pragmatist. It positions him as a kind of anti-hero, one who acts for the greater good, even if his methods are viewed as ruthless. Characters like Cecil always balance on the fine line between hero and villain, which makes them incredibly intriguing and complex. What sets him apart from the typical courageous hero is his ability to shift his principles, not only in saving the world, but also in protecting those closest to him. Beyond his changing ideals, Cecil doesn't possess the traditional physical traits of masculinity. Quite the opposite. Most masculine characters emphasize their strength through physical superiority, combat skills, or charismatic leadership. Cecil, however, derives his power not from brute strength, but from intelligence, strategy, and influence. He doesn't need to perform grand acts of heroism to prove his strength. The classic masculine hero follows a strict moral code, whether it's never kill or always protect the weak. Cecil, on the other hand, believes that sometimes sacrifices must be made to save more people. This places him in a moral gray area. He's not just a good leader, but a strategist who makes the difficult choices others refuse to. A typical hero strives to inspire others, to be a symbol of hope. Cecil, however, understands that heroism often conflicts with real efficiency. He doesn't seek recognition or glory. He doesn't care if he's seen as a hero or a villain. His only priority is ensuring the world's safety. Whereas most masculine heroes struggle between doing what is morally right and making the logical choice, Cecil has already settled this debate for himself. He is willing to make decisions that others would find horrifying. His quote, "We can be the good guys or we can be the guys that save the world. We can't be both," perfectly encapsulates his mindset. Masculine characters are often driven by ambition. They want to be the strongest, the most powerful, the most famous. They seek dominance, power, or legacy. But Cecil is different. He doesn't seek fame. He doesn't care if his name is remembered. He doesn't crave power for the sake of power, only for the results it can achieve. If he knew the world would be safe without him, he would leave without hesitation. Cecil is a character who not only defies the principles of classical courage, but also fails to meet society's expectations. Even the new iteration of the Guardians of the Globe fell apart due to Mark's accusations against Cecil. But instead of panicking, trying to make amends, or attempting to rebuild the old team, Cecil simply orders a new roster to be assembled. Pragmatic, efficient, and cold. People don't like individuals like him, but they fear them. Looking at real-life sociology, we often see that society, and women in particular, dictate what a man should be. They set conflicting expectations. A man should be strong yet gentle, firm yet understanding, dominant yet compromising. This contradiction persists, causing many men to suffer from burnout due to constant pressure. This paradox destroys lives. Many men, in their efforts to meet these contradictory demands, end up playing the role of a strong, independent leader, while simultaneously suppressing their vulnerabilities, worries, and doubts. This can lead to burnout, chronic stress, and even depression. When a person is expected to embody two conflicting ideals, it inevitably takes a toll on their mental and emotional well-being. Men, trying to fulfill both societal and personal expectations, such as those of women, often find themselves unable to be their true selves. They suppress their genuine emotions out of fear of appearing weak or failing to meet masculine ideals. This internal conflict breeds frustration and self-doubt. Society, in its push for an idealized version of masculinity, often overlooks the fact that such standards are not only unrealistic, but also harmful. Men who fall into these traps begin to question their own worth, leading to a decline in self-esteem, loss of purpose, and a mindset of merely surviving rather than truly living. The culture of toughness also discourages men from openly expressing their emotions or seeking help. This leads to social isolation, feelings of loneliness, and a lack of support, which in turn worsens psychological struggles. And this brings us smoothly to the next character. Conquest is the very definition of toxic, raw masculinity. Different from Nolan, Conquest isn't the kind who yearns for redemption or wants to express affection. He's the absolute embodiment of what his name symbolizes: conquest. He seems, on the surface, the archetypal classic man, steadfast in temperament, physically dominating, a warrior with monumental success, and a figure who inspires both fear and respect. Yet, as I have already indicated when speaking of the culture of brutality, Conquest is at heart a deeply unhappy individual. Even he concedes that he's lonely, lacking true companionship, and conscious that he's a monster. Conquest inspires fear and commands respect, but is a martyr as well. Only not in the classic sense. Not one who suffers for righteousness, but one who suffers because of it. Not only does Conquest relish battle, he's unable to function otherwise. War is all he knows, all that exists for him, and all which is expected of him. He's little more than a component in the callous imperial war machine, built for perpetual conquest. On this score, he's even more tragic than Omni-Man. While Nolan learns over time that it's possible to exist another way, Conquest's vision extends no further than battle. He's old now, he's endured countless wars, his body's been pitted by combat, but he's never given the chance to rest. The Viltrumites won't allow it. Won't allow him to die peacefully because he's still a weapon. He looks like an old general who's lived his lifetime on the battlefield, and knows that if it weren't for war, then he would be no one. He knows his own loneliness but is unable to stop it. And when he utters the words, "I'm so lonely," It's not a tossed-off line, it's a confession. He's devoted his whole life to power and achieved absolutely nothing but fear and hatred. He's a monster, and he knows it. He's used to being feared. He's used to being honored as a warrior. He's never been loved. He's never had a friend. Even among the Viltrumites, he doesn't have true companions, only calculating partners. In contrast to Mark, who wars for the people he cares about, Conquest wars for the sake of the fight itself. He has no one to defend because all his existence has been a destruction. He is the greatest symbol of what people think the perfect man should be. One expects strength inevitably to be the prelude to liberty. One becomes the more free, the more strong. But in the case of Conquest, his strength holds him captive. He's too essential as a soldier to be given a life outside the battlefield. Viltrumites won't allow him to die on his own terms. He won't be able to go away and say, "I've done enough." He will fight till his dying breath because that's all the kind of death that's being allowed for him. And when he beats him at last, Conquest smiles. He dies as he had long wished, in combat with honor. But that's the tragedy. He didn't want to survive. He doesn't die because he's been defeated. He dies because it's the only way out. For him, failure is not death. Rather, death itself is a liberation. And Conquest isn't the only one who thinks so. There are a lot of men with this attitude in today's world as well, who perceive death as the only escape from their ceaseless frustrations. That's the reason Conquest struck so close to the hearts of people after Episode 8, Season 3. In the animated series, his character developed a richness that the comics lacked. It made his agony and his philosophy more real, more heartbreaking. If Conquest embodies unrelenting, unbound power, then Nolan must be the shattered warrior who attempted to break free from this pattern, only to find it already too late. And Cecil, he's the calculating tactician who operates outside the bounds of conventional morality. But suppose you were offered a choice at the very start. Mark was not born with a predestined fate such as Conquest. He didn't exist for centuries under a strict system such as Nolan. He can create his own destiny. But the issue is, that destiny isn't defined. If the series already presented us with 3 models of masculinity, each culminating in suffering, then it challenges us with a brutal question. Is it possible to be strong and not become a monster? Mark treads a fine line between the two extremes. He wishes to be a hero, but not a cruel one. He wishes to be strong, but not a destroyer. Is it possible, though? Does power always require the cost of sacrifice? With Mark, the series raises its final question concerning what it means to be masculine. Can one be both genuinely kind and genuinely strong, and not have a horrible cost? Mark is intentionally designed so that the audience can relate to him. I still vividly remember watching the first season's opening episode when Debbie walked in on Mark as he sat on the toilet, reading a magazine, only for him to protest that he wasn't a little kid anymore. At that moment, I saw myself. It's no secret that Invincible's target audience is mostly teenagers aged 15 to 20. And even small everyday moments like that reflect things we all go through. Teenagers, like Mark, are trying to figure out who they are, what's right, what's wrong, and how to navigate the expectations placed on them. And like any teenager, Mark is constantly pulled in different directions. On one hand, society tells him who he should be: strong, confident, successful. His admiration for his father, his desire to follow in his footsteps, is even endearing. On the other hand, Mark still doesn't fully understand who he is. He wants to be a hero like his father, but he doesn't yet grasp what that truly means. He dreams of greatness, but soon realizes that power isn't just a privilege, it's a burden, and sometimes a curse. If Conquest is strength without doubt, and Nolan is strength weighed down by its consequences, then Mark is strength searching for its meaning. He endures pain, defeat, and betrayal. Yet, unlike Conquest, he has the option to pause, step back, and ask himself, Do I even want to become like them? Because he isn't chained to the Viltrumite Empire. One of the most powerful moments in the series is the climax of Season 1, when Nolan beats his son, trying to force him into accepting the Viltrumite way. At that moment, Mark is literally being torn between two different versions of masculinity. One that demands that he prove his strength at any cost, and one that refuses to abandon his humanity. And when, broken and bleeding, he tells his father, "I still have you, Dad," he makes his choice. But the question lingers. Can he truly break free from this cycle? Because no matter what he chooses, he is a Viltrumite. And deep down, a part of him fears that one day he might become just like his father. That fear defines him. Mark is masculinity in transition, still forming, still evolving. He embodies the struggle between what others expect of him and what he wants for himself. And that's why he resonates so deeply with the audience. Because who hasn't at some point asked themselves, who am I? How can I be strong without losing myself? This is why the deconstruction of traditional masculinity through Conquest and Nolan is so important. Because after them, only Mark remains. He's the one left to redefine what masculinity can be. We see this shift in the real world too. The old masculine professions, jobs that were once respected, are being replaced by new ones, often more profitable, but dismissed by older generations as worthless or a waste of time. At the same time, women now enter traditionally male-dominated fields, only to face criticism and resistance. When it comes to morality, people tend to fall into three categories. The heroes, those who try to do everything right, never lie, never cheat, never swear, never drink. The villains, those who know right from wrong but choose personal gain over morality, stepping on others to succeed. The ones in between, those who sometimes fall into both categories but genuinely feel remorse when they do. But today, things are different. Just 100 years ago, prostitution was considered a disgrace. Now many women brand themselves as independent influencers, monetizing their personal appeal online. The question has shifted from, is this good or bad, to, why do you assume this is bad? I'm not hurting anyone. This shift, however, comes at a psychological cost. When people feel like they must constantly balance conflicting roles, it leads to stress, burnout, and anxiety. Society demands that men be strong and successful, but not too successful, lest they come off as arrogant. They must be tough, but also emotionally open, just not too vulnerable. This contradiction creates internal turmoil, and many, especially men, struggle in silence, unable to express their emotions or seek help. The myth that a man must always be strong and composed is deeply damaging, breaking people down from the inside. Mark's journey in Invincible reflects this dilemma. He isn't a perfect hero. He makes mistakes, doubts himself, and struggles to define his own moral path. He's not someone who has all the answers, but someone who keeps searching for them. And that's what makes him human, real. In a world where traditional standards are constantly being questioned, perhaps being a hero isn't the most important thing anymore. Maybe what truly matters is being honest with yourself and continuing to ask the questions that matter. Mark redefines courage. He challenges the notion that men must devote themselves entirely to an ideal or a mission. He allows himself to seek help, to make mistakes, to rely on others. Mark isn't the kind of character who will bear his burdens alone out of pride. Instead, he shares them with those he trusts, allowing himself to feel, to break down, even to seem pathetic in the eyes of the so-called real men. And there is another character who followed a similar path. Rex was rude, brash, sarcastic, immature, cocky, arrogant, argumentative, and harsh, especially toward his teammates and supposed friends. He had a habit of making crude jokes at their expense, showing little regard for how his words affected others. His sharp tongue and abrasive attitude often came across as outright hostility, regardless of the status or reputation of those he interacted with. Because of his relentless sarcasm and deep distrust of others, he wasn't exactly well liked within the superhero community. But there was a reason for his behavior. His difficult past shaped him into the person he became. As Invincible progressed, fans began to appreciate Rex more with each season. Beneath the layers of arrogance and immaturity, a deeper, more complex character started to emerge. As he embarked on his redemption arc, audiences saw a different side of him. A man trying to change, to be better. Rex is a prime example of someone who initially embodied the toxic ideals of traditional masculinity. He masked his insecurities with bravado, his pain with sarcasm, and his loneliness with arrogance. His behavior often irritated those around him, but it wasn't born out of malice. It was survival. Rex was not raised in a loving, supportive home. His family didn't nurture him or teach him right from wrong. Instead, they sold him to an organization that experimented on him, granting him his superpowers. Simply put, Rex raised himself. Without proper guidance, he struggled to understand the nuances of social interaction. What was appropriate, what was harmful, what was good or bad. While he could be insufferable at times, there were also moments when he showed surprising kindness, proving that he had the capacity to be more than just a toxic loudmouth. Perhaps, like many other young heroes, he grew up idolizing the idea of courage, watching fearless heroes save the world and wanting to be just like them. But what he thought was strength was actually just a defense mechanism. His near-death experience at the hands of Lizard King was a turning point. Facing his own mortality forced him to reflect on his life. He regretted the way he had treated people, realizing how much damage he had done, not just with his fists, but with his words. From that moment, he started to change. While he remained short-tempered and full of energy, his arrogance softened. He became more thoughtful, more respectful, more aware of those around him. His growth allowed him to find happiness in the simple things: cooking, companionship, and the warmth of human connection. But even as he found pieces of happiness, he was still haunted by his identity. When Ray chose to leave the superhero life behind, realizing that Cecil saw them as nothing more than expendable soldiers, she wanted Rex to come with her. She feared losing him, just as she had lost so much already. But Rex couldn't walk away. Being a hero wasn't just a job for him, it was his entire being. Without Rex Splode, who was he? If he abandoned his alter ego, if he stepped away from the life of a superhero, then what would be left? He had always dreamed of a normal life, of something quieter, something safer. But the thought of actually choosing that life terrified him. By season 3, we see him evolve even further. He becomes a pillar of support for his friends, helping Unbreakable and Adam Eve, standing by Ray even as they navigate their shifting relationship. There is even the spark of something deeper between them. And just as Rex finally completes his redemption arc, just as he begins to embrace an ordinary life, to step away from the reckless bravado and self-destructive cycle that defined him, he makes the ultimate sacrifice. He dies. But in doing so, he proves the kind of man he had become. Rex's story is a powerful reminder that true courage isn't about never making mistakes. It's about acknowledging them, learning from them, and making amends. His journey shows that strength isn't about playing the role that society forces upon you, but about choosing your own path, even when it's difficult. Ultimately, Rex's story is about breaking free from imposed expectations. It's about realizing that we don't have to follow the ideals that others set for us. Because real strength comes from being yourself, flaws and all. William is a character who challenges traditional stereotypes about masculinity and the way society perceives gay men. He doesn't fit the outdated caricature of the weak or overly effeminate gay character, often seen in older media. Instead, he embodies confidence, inner strength, and remarkable composure, qualities that even the toughest individuals might struggle to maintain in extreme situations. One of the greatest demonstrations of William's resilience is his scene with Omni-Man. Standing before a godlike being who has just slaughtered dozens in mere seconds, William doesn't crumble. He doesn't beg, flatter, or try to save himself through submission. Instead, he keeps his head held high, maintaining his dignity and even finding the strength to crack a joke. That is true masculinity, the ability to remain composed in the face of overwhelming danger, regardless of physical strength or status. In this sense, William is reminiscent of Omar Little from The Wire, another character who defies expectations of what a gay man should be. Omar, a street legend and terror to drug dealers, lives by his own code, showing no fear and making no excuses for who he is. He embodies hypermasculinity while remaining openly gay, proving that masculinity is not about brute force or aggression, but about inner strength, integrity, and staying true to one's principles. Characters like William challenge the idea that masculinity is defined by sexual orientation, appearance, or stereotypical behaviors. Instead, they show that it is demonstrated through actions, through perseverance in the face of hardship, the ability to stand firm under pressure, and the courage to remain oneself even in difficult circumstances. Throughout Invincible, William remains one of Mark's most steadfast friends. Unlike many others, he isn't afraid to be completely honest with him, even when the truth is harsh. He doesn't treat Mark differently because of his superhero status, nor does he idolize or flatter him. Instead, he demands accountability, pushes him to think critically about his choices, and ultimately helps Mark grow into a better person. William serves as a grounding force, reminding Mark that there's a world beyond his superhuman battles, a world where emotions, relationships, and personal integrity matter just as much as strength. Another crucial aspect of William's character is his emotional openness. Unlike the traditional idea that masculinity requires suppressing emotions, William is unafraid to express his feelings. His vulnerability, especially in his relationship with Rick and in his struggle to cope with loss, is what makes him truly courageous. Throughout Invincible, William remains one of Mark's most steadfast friends. Unlike many others, he isn't afraid to be completely honest with him, even when the truth is harsh. He doesn't treat Mark differently because of his superhero status, nor does he idolize or flatter him. Instead, he demands accountability, pushes him to think critically about his choices, and ultimately helps Mark grow into a better person. William serves as a grounding force, reminding Mark that there's a world beyond his superhuman battles, a world where emotions, relationships, and personal integrity matter just as much as strength. Another crucial aspect of William's character is his emotional openness. Unlike the traditional idea that masculinity requires suppressing emotions, William is unafraid to express his feelings. His vulnerability, especially in his relationship with Rick and in his struggle to cope with loss, is what makes him truly courageous. William subtly dismantles the outdated idea that masculinity and homosexuality are somehow incompatible. His life is not defined by his romantic relationships, but he also doesn't close himself off from love. He is deeply committed to his boyfriend, but maintains his own ambitions, interests, and worldview outside of that relationship. In many ways, William is one of the most self-assured characters in Invincible, and truthfully, more confident than many real people. Through William, Invincible does more than just present another supporting character. It challenges outdated notions of what it means to be a man. He proves that masculinity isn't about aggression, suppression, or conforming to rigid social expectations. Instead, it's about self-confidence, emotional openness, and the courage to be yourself, even in a world that may not always be accepting. Everyone looks up to heroes as symbols of hope, courage, and strength. Omni-Man seems to check all those boxes. He's powerful, fast, and principled, but heroes aren't always what they appear to be. What if the hero we trusted the most was never on our side at all? A betrayal so huge that it doesn't just shock us, it changes everything we thought we knew. Is he a villain? What's going on here? That's what makes Omni-Man such a brilliant twist villain. To understand how Omni-Man was written, we need to go back and analyze what made him stand out. From the moment we meet him, Omni-Man is portrayed as everything you'd expect from a superhero. Immense strength, incredible speed, and a calming presence that towers over everyone. Essentially, he's the personification of justice. He doesn't just defeat villains, he completely obliterates them. Omni-Man is also seen as a symbol of safety, a superhero so powerful that no monster could challenge him. Even the Guardians of the Globe need a full team to defeat enemies, but Omni-Man fights alone. His unmatched strength allowed him to operate as a rogue hero, standing alongside the Guardians while not officially being part of their team. Despite his overwhelming power, Omni-Man wasn't just a cold brute. He had a human side. He was a family man. He was a devoted husband to his wife, a guiding father to Mark, and a protector of peace within the walls of his home. He wasn't a superhero who carried an air of superiority. He was just like us, a man with a family, which made him unexpectedly endearing, even for a superhero. Essentially, he was like Superman, but with a mustache. He looked every bit the part. A chiseled jawline, broad shoulders, draped in a flowing cape, and a commanding presence that radiated strength and righteousness, which made him all the more disarming. No one could have seen what was coming. This was when the first cracks began to show. When Mark finally got his powers after 17 years of waiting, it should have been a cause for celebration, right?
Guess who's finally getting his powers?
Are you sure?
Pretty sure.
Yet, when Mark told Omni-Man, he didn't seem happy at all. He looked distraught. No one could have guessed what was going through his mind. Maybe he was afraid of pushing Mark too hard, or doubting his ability to mentor his own son. But deep down, we all know there was only one question running through his head. Should he tell Mark the truth? Spoiler! He did, but not by choice. Their father-son relationship didn't crack until much later in the series, when the big twist was revealed. Up until that point, they enjoyed a relatively normal relationship. Omni-Man taught Mark how to fight, something Mark had dreamed of for the past 17 years. Now it was his time to shine.
Use your whole body. You can punch with your arm, but if you punch with your shoulder, your hips, and your legs as well...
But being a good superhero takes more than just passion. It requires raw strength and the intelligence to develop strategies that maximize one's power. Other than fighting, one has to learn the art of mobility. Omni-Man might have the key to flight, but none of this would matter if he didn't pass down the most important trait of all: the right mindset. It all seemed like a typical superhero progression. The son gains powers, and the dad is there to teach him. But when we take a closer look at Omni-Man's actions, we realize the secrets may have been hiding in plain sight. Mark wasn't just any superhero. He was a Viltrumite. Omni-Man had been dropping hints all along. The facade was starting to crack. Omni-Man was playing the long game, following a plan that Viltrum had set for him. We started to see his frustration while training Mark. Omni-Man was disappointed in his son's talents. He also seemed uneasy around the other heroes, not out of respect, but because he didn't view them as equals. While the Guardians of the Globe fought together, Omni-Man was always slightly apart, as if he was just tolerating them. There was nothing overtly villainous about it, until the big twist hit. The massacre. The mask dropped, and Omni-Man did it without any dramatic speech. It was cold, calculated murder. efficient, and emotionless. The lack of hesitation forced us to question everything we believed about Omni-Man. Was he being controlled? Was he blackmailed? How could the symbol of strength destroy the strongest team humanity had to offer? Had he really turned into a villain? But there was only one question left. Why was he doing this? It took a whole season before he started to share the truth with Mark. Omni-Man's home planet, Viltrum, wasn't interested in helping lesser developed worlds. The Viltrumites were conquerors. After facing too many losses trying to brute force their way to world domination, they devised a strategy to conquer with fewer casualties. The plan was to send a Viltrumite to specific planets to gather intelligence and weaken them for eventual takeover, all while keeping their own forces in check. Omni-Man wasn't the considerate family man he had made himself out to be. His mission wasn't about protecting Earth. It was about ensuring Earth was weak enough for Viltrum to take over. When the Guardians of the Globe began to pose a potential threat, that's when Omni-Man took action and eliminated them. Everything he did wasn't about protecting Earth. It was for Viltrum. He wasn't just a rogue hero who wanted to do good without affiliating with the Guardians. Omni-Man had his reasons for staying apart from them. The fatherly smiles and guidance he showed were all part of his plan. None of it was about helping people. It was all about fulfilling his duty as a Viltrumite. Even though he enjoyed his time on Earth, when duty called, he abandoned everything he had built. He treated his life on Earth like a vacation. And when it was time to return to his true purpose, he didn't hesitate. Operating on a completely different moral code than humans, Omni-Man was a conqueror. He was logical, calm, and 100% convinced that he was always right. He thought of himself as the perfect Viltrumite, strong, emotionless, and efficient. Yet, when he spoke about Mark's mother as if she were just a pet to him, there was no turning back. Mark could no longer accept him. It wasn't just about being a hero anymore. Mark was fighting for his humanity. Every time he resisted, Omni-Man hit him harder, teaching him a harsh lesson. Humanity is weak, and unless Mark embraced his Viltrumite nature, he would never be strong enough to protect anyone. This moment broke Omni-Man. For the first time, he began to question the Viltrumites' supposed perfection. If they were supposed to be the ultimate conquerors, why was Omni-Man feeling emotions? He wasn't the calm, calculated Viltrumite anymore. He was a human who could feel emotions, and that made him a failure in the eyes of his people. But in that moment, he realized that maybe he wasn't as perfect as he had always believed. Omni-Man's time on Earth made him question everything about himself. He may have been a Viltrumite, but he was starting to care, starting to feel. His decision to leave Earth with tears in his eyes was a moment of internal conflict he had never faced before. The complexities of Omni-Man's character, a loving father and a cold conqueror, create a terrifying twist villain. His character is a mix of charm and cruelty, making him a truly memorable villain. Omni-Man's story teaches us how to build a villain who isn't just evil for the sake of it, but one who believes he is doing the right thing. It's not just about conquering Earth for him. It's about bringing what he believes is a better future. But what if we gave Omni-Man another twist? What if, after everything, he began his path to redemption? Unlike other villains, Omni-Man isn't your typical, all-powerful alien savior. He started as the ideal hero, only to reveal himself as a conqueror in disguise. That's where the real power of the twist lies. But what if, in the end, Omni-Man finally chose a different path? As Omni-Man takes off into the distance at the conclusion, it feels like he's abandoning more than just his mission. He's abandoning the emotional baggage that he's been carrying along with it. The tears that are shed are not only for the world itself, but for the family that he's leaving behind. Omni-Man finally reveals vulnerability, and in that instant we know that even the most powerful and heartless villains are not above emotion. Omni-Man's odyssey is one of turmoil, from hero to corrupted conqueror, and then to tormented father. It's one of betrayal, moral gray area, and the conflict between love and duty. He's the type of character who makes us consider the validity of right and wrong, and if the exercise of power is worthwhile, if it comes with the price of humanity. His corrupted depravity is not merely about conquering worlds. It's conquering his own feelings, his conviction, and his love of something he never set out to love. What is so remarkable about Omni-Man is how his story makes us question ourselves as viewers. We are compelled to ask ourselves if he is actually an evil character or merely the product of his environment and upbringing. Can we judge someone who genuinely believes that what he is doing is right if his actions are brutal and destructive? This gray area when it comes to morals makes Omni-Man an equally compelling and irresistible character to watch. He is not just an evil character, but rather a tragic character who is stuck between doing what he must and the love he has come to develop with his family. As Omni-Man's story progresses, his character is revealed to not be one-dimensional by any means. He is a villain with layers, and these layers are precisely what make him so memorable. His journey is not merely about his ruin, it's about the inner conflict he experiences and the decisions he makes in the process. Omni-Man ultimately stands as a testament to the fact that villains are not created. They are made, and sometimes the scariest villains are those who think that they are the hero in their own narrative. Omni-Man's journey may not be through just yet, but his legacy among the greatest twist villains in contemporary storytelling is set in stone. And who knows, perhaps, just perhaps, he is on the way to redemption. As Omni-Man's story progresses, the struggle within him is more than merely an ideological war between duty and his newfound human attachments. What if there's an added level to his inner struggle, a level related to an overwhelming feeling of personal failure? Omni-Man grew up on Viltrumite principles, survival of the strongest, power being paramount, and emotion being the equivalent of being soft. What if, in spite of it all, Omni-Man has begun to believe that he has failed the Viltrumite cause, not merely on Earth itself, but in his very nature? He is regarded as the symbol of power, and when he catches a glimpse of his son, Mark, there is an instant recognition. Mark is the embodiment of all that Omni-Man rejected, the attachments, the humanity, and the sympathy that come with them. The increased emotional connection with the son that Omni-Man initially tried to stomp out starts to erode the foundations on which the emotionless Viltrumite he worked so hard to be built himself. His greatest vulnerability is this: he will never be able to fully shed the humanity he has come to value. Omni-Man's power, ironically, is in effect his biggest liability. He hurts not just from the failure of his mission, but from realizing he may never have been strong to begin with, not through lack of physical strength, but because he cannot reproduce the strength that resides in togetherness with others. He perceived the world to be one in which he could conquer and be strong, and an encounter with human nature through Mark shatters his clear definition, questioning all of his set principles. What if Omni-Man truly does begin to question his perfection to be a Viltrumite? After all, strong as he once was, he could not be completely faultless, could not be the ideal he was taught to be. His feelings, which he has long thought to be a vulnerability, begin to surface more and more, and with more despair. He understands that with this fight to dominate the galaxies under his control, he does not possess what makes humans strong, the ability to feel and connect with others. And sooner or later, there comes the moment when Omni-Man starts questioning his people. Does a world governed by harshness and brutalism really benefit everyone? As he comes to deal with the reality of human emotion and affection, he realizes that these aspects of human nature are as powerful as any physical effect. Love, affection, and self-sacrifice, these human qualities that he has dismissed so long, begin to shine like beacons and break down his past attitudes. and it is the comics that reveal it best. You should read them if you are interested in what becomes of Omni-Man towards the conclusion of the 3rd season. Through this means, Omni-Man is drawn into a far greater conflict, one not only personal, but one he has with his people. Not only does he reject his mission, he starts to question the nature of power itself. And this makes him come to the one choice that will make him more man than he could ever have thought to be. He becomes one who will turn away from Destroyer and move towards Creator, albeit on his own terms. As Invincible progresses, we come to see that Omni-Man is far from one-dimensional villainy. He's multidimensional, complicated, and frankly, that's what makes him so memorable. His tale is not merely one of chaos and ruin, it's one of a man in the midst of brutal internal conflict, struggling to reconcile the beliefs he grew up with, and with feelings he never imagined he'd experience. Omni-Man teaches us something significant. Sometimes villains are created, and not born. And the most terrifying ones? They're the ones who still think they're the hero in their own story. Now, Omni-Man's story isn't finished. However, let's be real. He's already solidified himself as one of the great twist villains in contemporary narrative. And perhaps, just perhaps, redemption is not entirely out of the question for him. As his narrative progresses, it becomes evident that Omni-Man's conflict is not merely about loyalty to Viltrumite Empire and the life that he has created on Earth. There is another level, one that runs deeper, an evolving feeling of personal failure. He was brought up on Viltrumite principles, survival of the strong, power being paramount, feelings being a vulnerability. But what if Omni-Man secretly believes he has not only failed Earth, but the very purpose he was trained to fulfill? As he looks into his son Mark, he does not merely see potential. He sees something monstrous. In Mark, he beholds all that Omni-Man was conditioned to reject: compassion, connection, humanity. And that bond between the two men, one that Omni-Man worked so hard to destroy, gradually seeps past the walls he had erected. His biggest weakness is not physical, it's emotional. Despite his struggle to fight it off, Omni-Man cannot shake the humanity to which he has grown attached. And the kicker? He begins to see that despite all his physical power, he is missing something far greater. The power that comes from connection, from empathy, from love. That inner, unbreakable human power that cannot be defeated by fists. The more he comes to feel, the more he questions all that he ever believed. Was the Viltrum way, ruling by power, ever the right way? Must a society founded on brutality and fear be considered strong? Or does being strong consist of vulnerability, compassion, and sacrifice? This conflict comes to life so well in the comics. And if you're wondering what becomes of Omni-Man following Invincible Season 3, you'll certainly want to read them. Ultimately, Omni-Man's struggle becomes greater than himself. Not only does he go against one mission, he questions the belief system of an entire empire. He begins to ask the one question that makes all the difference. What if being strong means not to crush others, but to elevate them? And perhaps, just perhaps, Omni-Man's destiny is no longer one of destruction, but one of creation, redemption, and finally being something more than just a soldier. Finally, being a man. If you liked the video, please subscribe and put a like. Suggest your ideas in the comments and I may realize them. Good luck to everyone.